Before we go into the podcast, I want to just talk about a business that I've set up with my friend George. It is called the Podcast Introduction Group. So if you want to join and be able to be featured on 24 to 48 podcasts to be able to reach an amazing audience, this is the place you need to go to. Podcast, being a guest on podcasts, is automatically establishing you as an authority and is able to build your personal and professional brand. We handpick of a bank of podcasters that we have to be able to grow your business and brand. We do 100% of everything that needs to be done by my team. You do not need to lift a finger. You are able to expose yourself to new and relevant markets by going on other people's podcasts. You also are able to create brand loyalty. People will love listening to you and coming back to your products or services, and it's able to increase your revenue. So if you want to be able to get involved, you can sign up quickly, registered with an account manager. There's an onboarding call where we target the podcasts that you want to be on, the type that you want, whether it's entrepreneurship, business, health, fitness, whatever it is. We then match you to those podcasts and you can start your journey. We have regular catch-ups with our account managers, and Google ranks you when people search for you. So when people are searching for you, you're able to see your podcasts at the top of the list. So if you are interested in being a podcast guest on multiple podcasts, we are the place to go. If you go to podcastintroduction.com and go and register your details, we will have a quick call with you, match your podcast that you want to be on, and we can then start this process ASAP. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Back onto the podcast then. Just one last thing before we go into the podcast. I just wanted to talk to you about the fact that I have a YouTube channel that has been going for quite some time, and I am recording and releasing all of my interviews with some short videos as well on YouTube. So please do check it out. YouTube on Absolute Business Mindset. You'll see a bunch of interviews there, all the longer format interviews and some short videos as well. So please enjoy that. And here goes with the podcast interview. This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. This podcast will interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and people in their careers. We will delve into their journey to success, key life milestones, and go deep into their area of expertise. Get ready to learn from other successes and failures. Today we have Gary Crotaz, who is an executive and mindset coach and author. Hello, Gary. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure. We've got lots to talk about. You've taken, as what I saw, 3 different career changes.
That's right.
Which is fascinating. I've done probably 2, 3 myself. So it'll be really interesting to hear your journey and how you got to where you are now. So as always, we start with your education. And usually when I talk to people about their education, it's a degree or a master's in said subject, and sort of talk around what was motivating them to do that. But your original training was to become a doctor, right. In respiratory medicine.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So let's start with, why did you choose medicine first of all, and sort of tell me the process, because you went to be a PhD in as well, so you were committed to the career. So tell me a little bit about it.
I should have been committed. So at the age in the UK. At the age of 17, when you're doing your A-levels, you have to decide whether or not you want to go to medical school and train as a doctor. And that's what I thought I wanted to do when I was 17. So I applied to medical school. In the US, it's a little bit different because you go and do a different degree. And then after you've done your first undergrad, then you go to medical school. But in the UK, it's at 17. And I didn't come from a family with doctors. So, I didn't really know that much about life as a doctor. Anyway, so I started medical school, went to University of Bristol, and I did my 3-year undergraduate medical training, so the lecture side of medical training, and I did an undergrad Bachelor of Science degree in anatomy, actually. So that was one of my specialisms in my undergrad training. After I'd done 3 years in Bristol, I then actually transferred medical school, and I went from Bristol to Cambridge in the UK, where I did my clinical medical training and also a PhD. So there's a particular program that's quite small in the UK where you can sandwich a PhD with your ward-based clinical training. So I was a medical student on the wards of Addenbrooke's Hospital with a white coat and all that, stethoscope, all that stuff. And then I was also working in a science lab for 3 years as part of that, where I did a PhD in respiratory medicine. So I was studying a genetic form of lung disease. So I was heading on for graduating at the age of about 28. So I was at medical school for 8 years doing all of that. And about a year before I finished, so I was about 27, and I was in a lab working with people who were doing their research, but they had qualified as doctors maybe 5 or 7 years before. So then for the first time, I was talking to doctors who were in medicine, practicing and working in hospitals and so on. And I started to realize that whilst I found medicine interesting, I didn't feel that sort of drive that, this is the thing that I really, really want to do. And I had this sort of revelation moment, I think, when I was about 27, when I suddenly realized, even though I'm on this kind of treadmill that you're on in medical school, year to year to year, exams to exams to exams, I don't have to do this if I don't want to. And if I don't want to do it, I don't actually know what else I would do, because, medical school, a bit like training to be a lawyer, is something that it's quite directional, it's quite vocational.
Yeah.
And so because I was in Cambridge, I had the opportunity to go to some of the careers events and just see what else you can do if you have a medical degree. And I looked at working in government, or I looked at working in investment banking or consulting or big corporate roles. And I didn't know much about them. And I discovered business consulting, management consulting. And I found actually that there were a lot of similarities with medicine, where you have a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of uncertainty, and you have to solve problems. And I just found it fascinating. So I decided about a year out from graduating that I wanted to see whether I could apply and get a job outside of medicine in consulting. And that's what I did. But I couldn't tell the people that I was training with, I couldn't tell the professors that were running the program, because it's really not the done thing to quit medicine, particularly after all of that time and investment in your training. So I had an offer from a management consulting firm in February. I took my finals in the summer. And in that whole time, I had to sit on the fact that I knew that I wasn't going to continue in practice as a medical doctor. So yeah, it was a big life change moment for me.
Right. I don't want to get into the management consultancy yet. I want to just go in a little bit into your medical experience. So what you said earlier on, that there was a difference between the theory and the practical side of being a doctor. What was the difference between the two?
Well, I think that there's two elements to being a doctor. One is, are you interested in, well, three elements. One is, fundamentally, do you like helping people? And I did, and I do. And that's always actually been a constancy. I think I just realized in my late 20s that there were many ways to do that, and medicine was only one of them. The second one is, do you find a specialism that is something that you want to pursue for your career? Because you have to decide whether you're a physician or you're a surgeon. And if you're a surgeon, are you a brain surgeon, a heart surgeon, a bowel surgeon, a toe surgeon? And you go through all of the different, you rotate through all the specialisms in your clinical training. And I think I never found something that I was so interested in that I felt that was what I wanted to dedicate my career to. The third element, which I think has become even more acute in the last sort of 20 years since I graduated, best part of 20 years since I graduated, is the impact on your personal life as a doctor. So just the practicalities of being a doctor, you're on these 6 or 12 month rotations for years, and you don't have a lot of control as to where you work. So if the job that is available is in Dundee, then you're moving yourself and your family to Dundee for 6 months or 12 months. And if the job is in Cardiff, you're moving to Cardiff, which might be great, but you don't have the ability to really say, I want to work in this part of the country doing this thing, because the opportunities are just, relatively limited. And in my year group, I think it was about 25% of the people graduating from Cambridge in medicine didn't have a job lined up for them when they left, because there's been over the years at various points a mismatch between the number of training posts available for qualified doctors and the number of doctors who are graduating. So actually, the proportion of medics who have trained and then within the first 3 years left the profession is really high. Sadly so, but is really high. And you see a lot today that, you know, the life for doctors is tough. And I have huge respect for doctors, you know, who are committed to that profession and that vocation. But it just wasn't for me.
My brother-in-law is actually a surgeon, and he lives in central London, but ended up he commutes to Gillingham in Kent every day, like when he practices. So he didn't choose that. It was pushed upon him. Now he's found a nice little niche. He does what he does and he enjoys what he does. But I just wanted to say about the investment side. So you must have invested a lot of time, money and effort into your PhD. How did you, your parents, your peers, how did they feel about that? Not just monetary investment, but also like time investment into it and then leave at the end of that period?
My parents were and have always been extremely supportive, luckily. My mum did say, "What's management consulting?" And then you look it up you look it up and you see, oh, here's the rankings of the most trusted and least trusted professions. And number one is doctor and dentist and vet. And at the bottom of the list is management consultant, estate agent and lawyer. So that was quite interesting. And even when you've explained management consulting to somebody, it still doesn't make sense necessarily. So for me, I think I've always had this philosophy that you are the sum total of your experiences with where you are now. So it's sort of, to me personally, it doesn't matter whether I trained in medicine or geography or French or not gone to university at all. The question is, what am I able to do today with what I've got? There's a quote in my book that is, start from wherever you are with whatever you've got. And it's this idea that, you can try and build a path based on a very logical, structured flow through of do this training, have those jobs, et cetera, et cetera. But actually in real life, things happen that you're not expecting. And, to live a life with regret is a really sad thing. So I've never regretted studying medicine, and I've never regretted leaving medicine.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm Alex, the host of X Health Show. Meet the future of healthcare. Think X-Men, that's X Health. Actual superheroes behind programming living cells to cure cancer once and for all. Tech that detects preterm delivery in seconds, brain-computer interface, or apps that employ AI to match your disease with the best treatment. X Health Show brings to you visionaries who push the boundaries of healthcare from Switzerland, the heart of Europe and the most innovative country in the world. Let me introduce you to their startups. Head to X Health Show, meet the future of healthcare. Happy to greet you there.
You talked also about sort of that in consultancy, in management consultancy, it's a data-driven business, a bit like medicine as well. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What other things do you think helped you from moving from medicine to management consultancy?
I think that something that I've always found helpful, there's different types of consultant. So there are consultants who are consultants because they're deep experts. And then there's consultants who are consultants because they're good thinkers or good question askers, not necessarily question answerers. And for me, because I came explicitly from a background where I had no formal business training, I had no finance and accounting training, and all the way through my career since then, I've always felt as though I'm not an expert in whatever I'm doing. We'll come on later to talk about retail and other areas where that is absolutely true. It means that I can ask a very open question in a very authentic way because I genuinely don't know the answer. But I think the art of me being good at what I was doing was the art of asking a good question that other people weren't thinking of to ask or weren't comfortable to ask in the environment. So I could always go, I don't know anything about this because I trained in medicine, not in business. And they go, oh, let me explain it to you. And when they explain it, it suddenly becomes clear what the thing is they need to be thinking about. And that has quite a connection into where I've ended up now in coaching, where my role is not to have an opinion. My role is not to be an expert. It's to ask good questions.
And the art form of asking questions is something that the best business people find. There, like you think of people like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, their critical thinking and ability to be able to ask key questions is probably their superpower when it comes to it.
Yeah, and sometimes the best question is not a complex one. It's, so why do we do it like that? And then just leave a gap for people to go, no, you're right, actually. We don't think enough about that. So why, and then do we know anybody else who does that we could compare ourselves against? Oh, yeah, that's interesting. We probably could find some people, but in our day-to-day rushing around trying to do what we do, we don't sort of step back and see the 10,000 foot view. So that's kind of that's the sort of consultant I was. It was playing that kind of role, helping people to stay focused on the big picture, because they were always an expert in the detail. But sometimes it's stepping back and seeing the big picture that shows you the pivots you need to make.
And what was it like walking in on your first day in a suit where you were used to the white gown, the white jacket? What was it like your first day with your suit and tie? And did you do a Windsor tie? Did you do a half Windsor? All that sort of stuff. What was that first day like?
I don't even know the tie knots, but it was very memorable. So I was working for a firm that was based near Victoria Station, in Enron's old head office of all places.
Interesting.
It's a global strategy consulting firm, and we were in the basement of a hotel near Victoria Station doing our basic Excel, finance, PowerPoint training. And I was on a row with all of these people that had just graduated from Stockholm School of Economics, and they were, brilliant. And I was just sitting there going, I have no idea what these words mean. And I remember sticking my hand up and asking a question. When you say profit, what do you mean? Because they were talking about all the different variants of profit. And for me, I was at the level of, the money you make minus the money it costs to do it equals profit. But I didn't have any of the most basic understanding of that kind of stuff. But again, it comes to, you've got to be prepared to ask that question. The other element that I was really striking was that, as a medical student, when you graduate, you're not a fully fledged surgeon, for example, or physician. You've been given the knowledge and the training to be able to start what is then another 15 years journey of development as a doctor. But still, you're sitting there going, I've assisted in operations. I've, held people's hands when they're dying. I've delivered babies, as part of your training. And then you're sitting there going, my role here is to write this slide and get the punctuation right and align the boxes exactly on the slide. And somebody else is thinking about what the graph shows right now. So, one of my early roles, we were doing a project on radiators. So we were trying to work out the future growth of the radiator market. And so I had to call plumbers to ask them how they think about what kind of radiator they install. And the way you call plumbers is you look up some plumbers on the internet and you call their mobile phones. And I was sitting there going, many or most of the medical students and doctors that I know would see this as a massive sort of come down from the responsibility of the role they were about to take on. And I knew that I had to sort of work through that phase and let go of my pretensions of what I should be able to do at the door. And often since leaving medicine, when I talk to other doctors leaving, it's one of the biggest things I say to them. I say, if you're going to change profession into consulting or anything else, you've got to realize that there's very little in your training to date that directly translates to the future. It's much more about who you are and what you can go on to do. So if you're going to have an ego and you're going to say, because I'm trained as a doctor, because I have a PhD, because I, have assisted in a kidney transplant, therefore I should have this kind of role, it's not going to work, because you're not going to get that kind of role because somebody else who's graduated with management and finance, for example, knows 100 times more than you do on what really matters right now. So there's a really interesting thing about the transition into alternative careers from medicine, because it's not a degree that gives you those kind of transferable skills.
And we've all been in that state of changing bullet points and the alignment and doing basic things on Excel. I think it's a lot of people through education, not just you through medicine, come out of education thinking they might have a master's or a PhD, and they think that they should be managing everyone on day one. But actually, there is value in actually doing those basic skills, just so you can later on be able to do the more complicated aspects of the business. But I just wanted to touch base before we go into your move to Mothercare and Selfridges. You wrote in the notes that you provided to me that you were an amateur and professional ballroom dancer.
Yes.
So where does that fit into? I'm intrigued the professional, because amateur, I can imagine you do it as a hobby, but you've taken things a lot further to do professional as well. So where does that fit into your story?
So I started ballroom dancing when I was 4 years old. So it was the thing that my parents took me to classes with my two older brothers when I was young. And my parents had done a little bit of dancing, but nothing, they hadn't done dancing competitions or anything like that. It's just something that in the 50s and 60s, people did at school, that kind of thing. So, I was taking dance classes. It sort of escalated over the years. I did my first ballroom dancing competition at the age of 9. I was one of those little kids in a white shirt and a little black bow tie. And I did it through to university, as a serious hobby, I would say, alongside schoolwork. And then medical school took over and it just got too busy, and I stopped. In my sort of early 20s, I'd done 2 or 3 years at university. And I thought that was me done. I thought, that was my thing that I'd done when I was growing up. And when I was in my late 20s, I was actually in my first job, in that consulting job, working 50, 60 hours a week. I got called by somebody at work. And she said, I'm looking for a dancing partner for a competition, for like a little, social competition back at Cambridge. They're getting the new team, the people that never danced before, never competed before. They need somebody to dance against. Would you dig out your old shoes and come do the competition? I thought, well, that'd be fun. But I literally haven't danced a step for about, 5 years. And that's where it started. So we did that little competition. Then we went and had a lesson together. Then we had a practice together. And then we had another lesson together. And what was it, 2005? So now 17 years later, we've been married for 11 years.
Oh, amazing.
We've got 2 little fluffy dogs. So that career turned into another 10 years. So I was expecting we'll do that competition. Maybe we'll do this for a couple of years. I'm in my late 20s, but work's busy. What happened was we started doing amateur competitions in the UK. So it was going out on a Sunday to a school hall or a church hall somewhere doing a competition. Yeah. Then after a few years, we were starting doing bigger competitions. Then we started to go abroad, and we thought, well, why couldn't we go and do the competition in Paris and go and see Paris whilst we're there? And then, well, we've never been to Prague. Why don't we go and do the competition in Prague? And when we started to travel internationally, we realized that there was this thing going on in Europe where there were these academies and clubs of top level dancers. So the equivalent of you're a distance runner and you go to Kenya or Ethiopia to immerse yourselves in that culture. We went to this little town in Italy where people flew in from around the world to this industrial estate and trained together in this really intense, professional elite environment. So we after about 5 years, we were in a place where we thought we'd done what we wanted to do with dancing in the UK, and we were either going to retire and just carry on without progressing our jobs, or we were going to see whether it was possible to explore what this life in Italy looked like. And so I went and talked to my boss at the time, and I said, what it would look like is we'd need to go 2 days a month out to Italy to train and develop, but I need to split my holiday into blocks of 2 days. And then we won't take a summer holiday, we won't take a Christmas holiday. And he went, great, let's see if you can make it work. So that's what we did. And we flew out to Italy. We trained there with the world champions and all these top couples. We ended up turning professional, and we represented England 7 times at world and European championships. We didn't win them, but we were there. And it was just, this sort of culmination of this drive for something that we were passionate about. We loved training, we loved competing, we loved developing ourselves, we loved the experience of dancing. It's an amazing thing to do. And we traveled in the end around the world. We competed in the US and Canada. We competed in Russia at the World Championships. We went to Bulgaria, Albania. And all the time we were funding it from doing our day jobs, but we were having to make compromises on the way we did our day jobs, the hours we worked, the way we worked with clients, to make sure that, obviously, number one, our employers and our clients needed to be really happy with the work. So we had to be really creative in how we trained 5-6 nights a week, and also deliver great work so that, the clients were happy. And I talk about that now in my coaching, and I talk to people about, what would you compromise to achieve the life that you really want? We compromised holidays, like just holidays for 10 years. When we went on honeymoon, when we got married in 2010, our honeymoon was going to a dancing training camp, because we didn't have the time or the money to go on some luxurious holiday to the Maldives or something like that. We went to a little town on the coast of Italy, stayed in a 3-star hotel, and went to the training camp, So yes, ballroom dancing it's been a fascinating journey for my wife and myself.
Absolutely fantastic. And so back to your career, or your business career, I should say. Yeah. So you then were a consultant for 7 years, and then you moved into in-house with Mothercare and Selfridges. Mm-hmm. What made you make that shift to in-house roles?
So I'd been in consulting for about just under 10 years in different firms, big firms, independent consulting. And I realized that at some point I probably needed to go and get a proper job. So get some proper corporate experience, because there's a lot that you don't do as a consultant. You don't line manage teams. You don't have the same responsibility for managing projects. If you're always an advisor, a supporter, and I was approached by somebody who I'd worked with as a consultant, and she was on the leadership team at Mothercare, and she said, we'd like you to come and have a conversation about whether you could join and help us, with this business turnaround. It was in 2013, when it was the beginnings of the real retail crisis that we've seen over the best part of 10 years now in the UK. And I said to her, I've never worked in retail. And she said, we don't need your retail expertise. We need your way of thinking. That's what will be helpful. Your how you handle uncertainty, how you think about data, how you bring clarity to situations. And in my head, I was like, this is going to last for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I suddenly realized that I literally have no idea what I'm talking about in retail, because I'd never worked in the retail space. But it turned into 5.5 years. So I was there. I was always on projects or in roles at Mothercare where it was a sort of, this will run for the next 6 to 12 months, and then we don't know whether there's anything else for you to do. But it turned out there was always something else to do. So I started as a kind of strategy troubleshooter. I became director of strategy, and I ran the UK store refurbishment program. So I ran a team to refurbish all of the UK stores. Then I did work on the international strategy for Mothercare. And in my final role, so my final year at Mothercare, I was on the executive team as customer director. So I had reporting into me the UK stores, the UK e-commerce team, the brand and marketing function. And as with most of my roles, I'm not an expert in running shops. I've never worked in a shop. I'm not an expert in e-commerce, but I know enough about it to be able to ask questions and align people around a consistent vision. So I think as a leader, for me, what I learned at Mothercare was really understanding my role and what I was going to do to be at my best as a leader. And again, it's something I lean into now as a coach. It's recognizing that there's different ways to lead. So if I'd come from, for example, a retail management path, maybe I've been a store manager, a regional manager, I could have done the role that I was doing in the end, and I would have done it in a certain way because that's the experience that I bring to that role. There's other people who did that role who came through a digital leadership role. So they were an expert in online marketing and digital marketing and that kind of thing. And for me, I was more an expert in the overarching customer vision for the brand. So I was thinking about what's the experience for a customer coming to Mothercare and what do they need? How does the whole thing need to work together to deliver the customer experience that we're looking for? So that was my angle of how to do it. So that was my role at Mothercare, and I was there up to the end of 2018.
I hope you don't mind me asking this, but through your consultancy roles, and you were there at Mothercare for a few years, there seemed to be quite a lot of change, quite a lot of changing roles, changing companies. Was that a deliberate career strategy to get to where you wanted to be? Why did you move so often, like every year or two?
Some people have got a real clear long-term vision, and they'll say in 10 years' time, I want to be running my own business, or in 10 years' time, I want to be a C-suite executive in a pharma company, whatever it is. I've never really had that. So my drive has been, I suppose I'd probably articulate it in the simplest way, to work with interesting people on interesting things. And I'm not particularly worried about what environment that's in, if I find it interesting. I have a sort of overarching field that I've got some minimum requirements where I've got to be able to keep a roof over my head and food on the table, that kind of thing. But actually, I compromise a lot. I personally choose to compromise a lot to find something that I love and something that connects deeply with my values and purpose, which comes into, the coaching philosophy that I have now. So actually, through my consulting career, the moves were very much driven by what it took to make the dancing career work. So I needed a certain amount of time flexibility, a certain amount of financial flexibility to fund the dancing that we were doing, to give us the ability to travel when we did, and to have the time off that we needed to train and compete. When I got into Mothercare, we retired as competitors about a year after I started at Mothercare. So there was a point where, and this was the same for my wife in her career, that there was a point where you started to really feel as though you were compromising your next 10 or 20 years of your career if you were going to say, I can't take this opportunity because of my, the other thing that I'm doing with my life. So we were just mindful, because we were coming to the end of our competitive dancing career, that there was a moment when it was probably the right thing to do to prioritize career growth. So when I got more into sort of strategic career growth, that was really when I started in corporate roles. And I was offered the opportunity to lead a transformation program, and I thought I could say no, but I should say yes for the learning and for the career development. And that's what I did.
Okay, thank you. So your third career change is executive coaching, and you decided to do it also in pandemic times as well. Yes. I made my shift from corporate to this and my properties and stuff through COVID as well. But that change in COVID time. So talk about the change first of all to become an executive coach. Why and how you did that. But equally, why did you do it during pandemic times?
So I've always, throughout my post-medical school career, I've been a sort of natural coach and mentor in an informal, unpaid way for many years. So talking to other doctors thinking about leaving medicine, for example, or, over the years working with team members, having people reporting into me, developing them. So it had always been something I was interested in, this sort of one-to-one conversation with people about their personal and career growth. When I left Mothercare at the end of 2018, so this is just over 3 years ago, I thought I was interested to start to see whether I could turn that into a paid activity. Although obviously right at the beginning, I didn't have professional training and development. And so it was very much a sort of super mates rates kind of environment. And I worked with 3 or 4 people who, were in my network, people that knew me. And we started to do some work together. And that was just me getting over that little hurdle of someone will actually pay you to spend time with them, helping them think about themselves. So I've been doing that for about 18 months, at the point that in my main activity, I'd been working. So I left Mothercare in 2018. In 2020, I started a project as interim group strategy director for Selfridges Group. And I joined Selfridges on a fixed contract on the 3rd of February, 2020. So at a time when the pandemic was a few cases in Wuhan and on page, whatever it was, 26 of the Daily Telegraph. And I thought, I'd spent 5.5 years in a pretty intense retail turnaround in Mothercare, being a very challenging period of my career. And I thought, I'm interested to do more work in retail, but I'm interested particularly to do it in a non-crisis environment. And in week 5, we all went home because of COVID and the stores closed. So, I was on the leadership team at Selfridges Group for about 7 months through that summer. And I was glad that I was there. And, the way that I could contribute with the team to helping, the business navigate through particularly that first 6 months of COVID. But it also reminded me of what was more important to me. And I realized that I kept coming back to the part of my role, the things I do that I really love is the coaching more than the strategy. Like I'm good and capable at the strategy, but I love spending time with people, helping them on their personal, professional growth. And I left the role in Selfridges at the end of September. And I thought, well, do I, go out into the market again and try and find my next consulting role, my next interim management role, or do I back myself and see whether I can make this coaching a go? The data was weak in terms of the volume of coaching I've been able to do over the past 18 months. But I think I had, for whatever reason, some confidence that I could make it work. So I decided at that point to start my professional training. So I started coach training in November 2020, which I did through the next sort of 9 months or so. And I also started to write the book. So I had been, for this 18-month period, I've been developing this idea, which is the foundation of the book. And that's what I've been working with my first coaching clients, my Mates Rates coaching clients on. And I thought, I like writing. I like the idea of publishing a book at some point. My experience from my PhD many, many years ago is how painful it gets if you get stuck in the middle, where you've gone far enough in that you can't give up, but you're far enough from the end that it's still hugely daunting. So I built myself a spreadsheet and set a target. And I said, I'm starting on the 1st of November and I want to finish the first draft by Christmas, which was a stupid idea. But at the same time, I did it because once I set my mind to it and I put my target on my spreadsheet, I couldn't not deliver it. So I had to deliver, 1,200 words a day. And I thought, they don't have to be great words. They just have to be words. They just have to cover the paper. I'm sure there'll be some value in there somewhere. Once it's written, I'm going to show it to somebody and see whether they think there's anything in it. And so that was the beginnings of the journey of coaching and the book.
And just to give a shout out, we're now on the 25th of January. Your book came out on the 13th of January.
That's right.
It was,
yeah.
Which is the idea mindset. So tell me a little bit about it. Who is it for? What do you cover? What ideas are you trying to translate in that book?
So the idea mindset, and you'll hear some themes that we've talked about through my own career experience. So the idea mindset is to help you figure out what you want from work and how to get it in a 6-week journey. So it is a combination of some content, some ideas, some inspiration, but critically some exercises that you do as you go through the book. Okay. IDEA stands for identity, direction, engagement, and authenticity. So what it's saying is discover who you are, what you stand for, what your strengths are. That's your identity. Discover something about your long-term plan, to the extent you might have one, but also in the short term, how you make decisions, whether to go left or right when faced with a choice. That's your direction. To design a future that fundamentally you love what you're doing. That's engagement. And that connects deeply with your values and purpose. That's authenticity. And so for me, the identity and direction part really comes from my strategy background, where I worked with companies and individuals over the years to say, who are you? What are you great at? Where are you going? How are you going to get there? What's the plan? When are you going to do it by? What might trip you up? That stuff. The engagement and authenticity is, but what do you really love doing? What's you at your best? What really makes you care about what you're doing? Which for me comes back to the dancing. So there was a point where we were absolutely compromising money, career progression, different things to follow our own passion. And when I talk to people who are my coaching clients and they're going through this kind of journey. For some people, that passion might be a cause. For some people, it might be their children. For some people, it might be, some other, longer term impact of something that they're doing. And going through this journey, it's helping you to work out what is right for you. So coming back to my job is to ask questions. I was saying to somebody recently about the book, it's quite different from a lot of self-help books, where self-help books often say, if I'll tell you how I live my life, and if you live your life like that, then you will also achieve riches and success. This book doesn't tell you what my day-to-day life is, neither would I recommend people follow it. It's about you asking yourself the questions of what really matters to you. So, for example, there's a particular exercise in the book that talks about, if you don't have a specific goal in mind, I want to be running my own sustainable footwear brand in 10 years' time. What are the kinds of things that are important to you? So the questions are things like, is it important to you to work in a team, or do you prefer working on your own? Is it important to you that you travel in the work that you do, or do you want to be staying at home? Is it important that you're doing one thing really well, or is it more important that you do a portfolio of different things? Is leaving a legacy important to you or not? So you go through these questions, and then by going through that, it causes you to start to see your choices in a different light. And so with many of my coaching clients, the transition they go through is they start thinking, here's a very specific thing. Should I do it or not? And they go to a place where they realize that they're looking more for an environment in which they're at their best, of which that specific example might be one example of that kind of environment, but actually there may be many other things that they hadn't considered. So, for example, somebody who is leaving a role in a pharmaceutical company might be thinking of roles with other pharmaceutical companies that they can do. But when you start to think about, if you take pharmaceuticals out of the equation, you think of the kind of work you like to do, the kind of people you like to work with, the kind of work-life balance you like to have, what's really important to you in the work that you do, in the life that you have. It may well be that the right next thing for you to do is something in the pharmaceutical space. But actually, it might be that there's something quite different that you could also consider that you never would have thought of if you stayed focused on a particular role, a particular opportunity. So it's about helping you to expand your thinking and to connect with what you love and what connects with values and purpose for you. For a lot of people that I work with, they didn't really know what their values are. And going through a process of trying to think about what those are, again, helps them to make choices, make decisions.
I think your book sounds fascinating, and it's really important having that sort of self-awareness and understanding yourself, which is what I assume IND sort of stand for. And then where you want to go, who you want to go with is the sort of ENA. I worked in corporate for 15 years, and what I saw in the consulting side of the Big Four was a lot of people filled with fear of change. So they found themselves a little niche, and they're fearful of taking that big next step, or they're fearful of leaving such a corporation because they've been working there for a long time. How do you work, and how do you overcome that when you're helping people as an executive coach, when people are fearful of change?
I think the start point is to understand what that fear is. So is the fear real? As in, if I quit my job tomorrow, I don't have another job lined up. There's absolutely a chance, a risk that I might have a period of time when I'm not employed. So that's a real fact-based risk. Or it could be somebody thinking, I was in this situation before and this terrible thing happened, so now I'm fearful of that happening again. But there's no particular rational reason why it might happen again. It's just I'm reflecting on a situation that I had before. So the first piece of self-awareness is to really understand, when you feel that fear, what that really is. And I talk a lot with my clients about the difference between fact and assumption. So that's going to happen. It's a fact that could happen, that I could be unemployed, I wouldn't have the income. Or it's an assumption that because it happened before, it's likely to happen again, but that might not be a reasonable assumption. Then I talk to people about the journey of change. So a lot of people who come to coaching, the way they articulate why they're where they are is they would say, it feels like something needs to change, but I don't know what. And what I feel at the moment is that I need to quit. So often at the moment, particularly in the Great Resignation, a lot of people are going, I feel like this is terrible, I need to quit. But then I feel fearful of quitting. So when you step away from, I need to quit, and you say, what you are saying is change needs to happen, let's start thinking about, well, what kinds of changes could that be? And how would you start to take some of those assumptions and fears and turn them into more rational conversations? So part of the journey of the idea mindset is to think about, for example, the team around you. So who are the people that are really in your close team who you could have a conversation with? They know you really well. They know you at your best. You trust what they say. It might be a partner, might be a sibling, might be a parent, might be a close co-worker or a former mentor. And have you actually gone and had those conversations with those people? And then are there other people in your network who maybe are not quite so close to you, but they could play a particular role here? So somebody else who's done the same thing. So do you know somebody that left your company a year ago, and you can go and talk to them about the good and the bad about what they did? So my own philosophy on change is you shouldn't be scared of making big moves, but you should only make those if they're right for you. And before you make a big move, you should think very carefully about it, talk to the people that know you best, sleep on it again, consider the worst case scenario outcomes. So one of the steps you go through in the idea mindset is to think about, well, what is the worst that could happen? And if that did happen, what would you do about that? And if the worst that can happen is you lose the roof over your head, then don't do it. And that's fine. That's a rational move. But still think about what it is that makes you so uncomfortable in your current role, and think more broadly about what else you could change to make you enjoy the work you're doing, and connect with what you're doing more effectively. Is that a conversation with your boss? Is it a change in working hours? Is it a change in activities you're doing? Is it delegating, giving something up that currently causes you frustration?
It's interesting. Your approach seems to be a really nice balance between using rational thought and thinking through things and understanding yourself, but equally understanding that we are emotional creatures and decisions can be made, or thoughts of decisions can be made emotionally as well. There seems to be, you seem to juggle those 2 points very, very well as a coach, I would say.
One of the most important things that you can do as a coach, and I'm trying to reproduce it in the book, in talking about how to use the book and go on that journey, is about having the time to think. So one of the things that I've written as a quote, and I put it in a box, says, you can't think to a deadline. And what that means is we spend our lives in a doing mode, and we're used to, going, I need to do these 3 tasks by Friday. And if I need to do them by Friday, I can make that happen by Friday. If I shuffle things around, if I work really hard, if I go to bed late, I can make it happen by Friday. If I said to you, think about where you want to be going with your career, but can you do it by 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon? You could come up with an answer to that question by 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. It might not be the right answer. So there's a big piece for me in coaching that is about giving your brain the space and time to come to the right answer. And when you think you come to an answer, come back to it a week later and see whether you still think that's right. So that process of iteration is really important. But what's happening with a lot of people is they're being forced into a place of thinking that they need to make these decisions quickly. And actually, they should make these decisions in as long as it takes them to feel comfortable with that decision. And once you find that clarity, you can then move forward without fear and with self-assurance, with confidence that you have thought it through. Doesn't mean you know it's going to work out. So when I've made my own career changes, when I left medicine to go into consulting, they could have been a complete disaster. It could have not worked out. I could have been no good at it. But I knew at the time that if I did that and it didn't work out, I knew what I was going to do next. And what I was going to do next was to move forward into something else. And I didn't know what that was going to be. But the decision I'd made when I left medicine was the one thing I'm not going to do is to go back. So if I go back to the thing that I know I wasn't satisfied with, I then would have, made clear to people that I wasn't as committed as other people. Then I would have had a damaged CV for the rest of my medical career. So that idea of failing forward is really important. So I'm a great believer in you don't have to have all the answers. So when I think about direction, you don't need to know exactly where you're going to be in 10 years' time at all. I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years' time. You're going to ask me in a bit where I'm going to be. What you do need to know is if you're faced with a choice tomorrow, how do you choose? And how you choose is based on weighing up what you know, what you don't know, what's important to you, how you understand yourself and what you love. That's the thing that helps you to decide. And many of the moves that I've made over the years have come in an unplanned way. It ended up being, the result of, meeting somebody, having conversation with somebody, being introduced to somebody. An opportunity came around. I was never looking for a role in the retail industry. I was never particularly going, in 5 years' time, I want to be an executive coach. I just knew that I loved that kind of conversation, and circumstances came around and I thought, now's the time. I probably, if you'd asked me 3 weeks beforehand, maybe I wouldn't have said now's the time. But just that moment, I weighed up what I had in front of me at that time, and I knew it was now.
So as you do the good shout, the next question is, where do you see yourself in 2 to 5 years? A fourth career change?
No, I'm tired. It is interesting. Somebody asked me recently, executive coaching is just a different thing that you're doing. And I said, actually, it's the thing I've always been doing. So coming back to having this drive at medical school, I was at medical school because I wanted to help people. Through my career, I've always found this bit the most enjoyable part. And now with the idea mindset, the ideas in that book, albeit, I've only just published the book, but the ideas I trace back all the way to when I left medical school. And as I've talked about in our conversation, the way I thought about that. So where I'd love to be in 5 years' time is actually more than anything else, this idea mindset concept, the book, what you get from it, I can expand that around the world and I get more people to access it. And part of my drive for writing the book was, I love working with my own coaching clients, but I think there's something more in this way of thinking that could reach out to many, many more people. And a book is a great way to do that. So I wrote the book to kind of take myself out of the equation. So I'd love to be in a place where, you can go into a bookshop in Australia or in the US or, in South America, and you could pick up a copy of the idea mindset and you could start your own journey of finding this clarity on who you are, where you're going for this future that you love and that connects deeply with your values and purpose.
Amazing. Okay. We're coming to the end of the interview. I asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer.
Okay.
First one is, what's the best decision that you've made?
I think it's the recent one. I think it would be the decision to go, I'm going to now throw all my eggs into the coaching basket, because I've known for a long time it's what I love doing, but I think I've never been more satisfied than when I backed myself to do that and let go of all the other things that I was doing that didn't point towards that angle.
Okay, thank you. What's the best advice you've been given?
That's an interesting question. So, and I remember through our dancing career, so this was many years ago, we were dancing in one of the beautiful ballrooms at the Blackpool Winter Gardens. Mm. And one of our teachers, my longtime teachers, who I'd known probably since the age of about 12 or 13, he's passed now, but he was probably about late 80s or 90, sitting in the front row, and he beckoned us over. And he said to us, I know everybody's focused on trying to win the competition and pursue their careers and train and get better and all those kinds of things. And he said, the one thing I want to say to you is don't forget to enjoy the journey as you're going along. And he said, if I look back at my own career, he and his wife were the first Western professional ballroom dancing couple ever to dance on the other side of the Iron Curtain. He said, I'm glad that we enjoyed the experience of going through that journey as well as pursuing our goals. And that's something that I've always held on to, not only in dancing, but in my wider career as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Who's helped you most in your career?
I would say Mildred, my wife, who keeps me grounded. We've danced together. We've been together. We've also worked together. So there was a time in consulting where we were both working for the same firm. We were working on the same projects. So we were really 24/7 in each other's company. And I think that at times when I needed to take risks, publishing a book is a risk, putting money into doing that is a risk, giving up, relatively higher paid, executive corporate roles is a risk, and she's backed me all the way. So yeah.
Amazing. Do you have any regrets?
I don't do regret. Maybe I should do more. Maybe I should do more. I don't do regret because of the way I think about, I've made all those decisions. This is where I'm at. This is what I've got. What am I going to do with it next? So yeah, I don't feel that. I don't feel that. I know lots of people do. And I probably did in the past, but now I've realized that, if it's not gone well in the past, well, I need to have learned something from that. And it certainly shaped how I'm going to face into challenges in the future.
Okay, awesome. What are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of the fact recently that I finished the book. One of the things in the book that I suggest people do, and I do this with all my coaching clients, is to do their formal strengths assessment profile, which is a thing called Gallup-Clifton Strengths. And in my own strengths profile, it highlights that I'm a brilliant starter of things, which is one of the reasons why I probably changed career quite so much, because I'm quite comfortable with that. I'm not a brilliant finisher of things, and so I need to partner with other people who help me finish. So I am proud of the fact that the book is not a half-done manuscript sitting on a shelf somewhere, and it's actually out in the market, and people are reading it. So that's very exciting.
Fantastic. What does legacy mean to you?
That's interesting. So the book very much for me is probably the first thing I've ever done with a real view to legacy. We don't have children. The work that I've done in the past hasn't particularly, built things that I feel, it's building something for the 100 years. There's something about having a book that I feel like if I was run over by a bus tomorrow, there'd be a book. And maybe that's the first time I felt that. So yeah, I quite like the idea of there being something when I'm not here anymore.
Awesome. And where can people find you if they want to reach out to you? So
I'm on LinkedIn as Gary Crotaz. I'm on Instagram as Gary Crotaz, Twitter a little bit. Probably either LinkedIn or Instagram, the easiest places to find me. There's also a website, garycrotaz.com, and a website for the book, which is theideamindset.com.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me on the show. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Pleasure. Thanks.